Shares in the online video streaming company Netflix have jumped almost 20%. It follows an increase in the number of subscribers to the service in the third quarter of this year. The company puts its success down to the popularity of its own shows like Stranger Things and House of Cards. But it's not the only streaming service with a strong following. Rival companies Amazon Prime and Hulu Plus are also popular among the growing number of people replacing traditional television with online streaming. So how much Netflix are we watching? According to the company's own figures, in 2015, it's about an hour and 33 minutes a day. On this, we're joined by James Cook, the technology editor for Business Insider UK. So, first of all, why were Netflix results so much better than people had expected?
So Netflix, at the end of its Q2 results, said it expected about 2 million new international customers. And last night they said they have 3.2 million international customers, which is a huge jump over what they predicted.
And what's the success down to, do you think?
So they've got this big global rollout strategy. They want to be in pretty much every country around the world. And it's pretty much a big gamble by Netflix that their mix of original content and accessibility could work. And it's an early sign that it is working.
Tell me about the issue of downloading, because one of their chief executives confirmed that the company might allow downloading to devices in future. How big a deal would that be for Netflix?
That would be a big change in their strategy. They've sort of dabbled in it in the past. They've sort of stopped people trying using illegal ways to download content. But if that's what Netflix customers are wanting around the world, because not everyone wants to stream it online like they do in the US, maybe Netflix will be forced to do that in some regions.
It is a competitive market, isn't it? So what's the key to making internet TV work? What are the main things that make it work?
So there's two things. One is the mix of original content. You know, Stranger Things, House of Cards, as you mentioned. It's a gamble on whether those are going to be popular overseas as well, especially as they approach the Chinese market too. And also it's the accessibility. It's having that library around the world that people want to tap into and making sure they have those streaming rights abroad as well as in the US.
Tell me about I mean, are we talking about the end of television broadly?
We could be. Maybe in the next 5 to 10 years. That's something that Netflix is very excited about. You know, I think their CEO, Reed Hastings, says they're looking forward to making the future. And if they want to end television, perhaps they could. But right now, I don't think they're quite going towards that yet.
And so what do the kind of traditional television companies need to do to try to fight back, or to kind of sort of perhaps compete with the outfits like Netflix, and we mentioned Amazon Prime and others?
Well, the danger is, of course, that they get involved in an arms race almost, with spending more and more on expensive TV shows. So, of course, you've got Netflix coming out with The Crown about the Queen soon. It's very much almost like a staple BBC-style drama. The BBC can't outspend Netflix, so it needs to look at what it can do better, but for less money.
When you say kind of doing stuff better for less money, but isn't there also a danger that actually it's a race to the bottom and everyone ends up having to cut costs and produce stuff which actually isn't as good as it used to be?
That's right. So Netflix said...
sounding like a dinosaur.
So Netflix has said they're looking for ways to make better TV for less money. So actually it needs to be a real balancing act from Netflix. They keep this high-quality content going out and are not making it too cheap and not too expensive either.
You mentioned markets earlier, markets like China and India. What are the big challenges? I mean, aside, I suppose, from the fact that you might not have the amount of content readily available to put out there to an audience and satisfy that audience. What are the big problems there?
So Netflix tried and indeed failed to launch its own service in China. It's very difficult to have a movie streaming service there. Indeed, Apple had to pull out of its iTunes film rental service there. So Netflix has actually taken a different model, and they're going to license their own content to China instead. Because the Chinese government, that's a lot more acceptable to them. They can sort of screen films much easier that way. So just been able to adapt Netflix's model overseas as they expand.
Just briefly, what would your advice be if you were talking to the chief executives of these kind of companies? How do they continue to grow?
It's having that money to have that upfront investment in original programming. It's expensive and it's a difficult model to get right, but if Netflix can keep a stream of original shows coming, that could really pay off.
Thank you very much indeed for your thoughts on the subject. Thank you.